Hello and welcome to my channel. This is a video about how to repair problems when you have a dual boot operating system and you try to clone the hard drive. I should mention this applies to situations where it's not dual boot. So you will find helpful information here to help you fix boot up problems after cloning a drive, regardless of the scenario. In my situation, I was cloning the hard drive to a larger drive. In your situation, you may clone it to an SSD because it's faster. In either case, this video will go through some of the utilities I used and some command line utilities that I used for fixing my boot problems after the clone. So, without further ado, one of the utilities I used was AOMEI, or AOME, Partition Assistant. Now, they didn't sponsor this video. It's just a product I like and I use. And what I did is I go in here and I pull up the properties on the partitions that are for my different operating systems in my dual boot. And what's important here is the volume information. I want to record that because I'm going to need it later on in the video. Additionally, I'm showing here is that it's just the one drive. I haven't installed the other drive yet. After installing the other drive, you can go ahead and use the utilities in AOMEI or the product you prefer and clone the disk. Now, I'm going to show you some of the steps to follow. This is direct from AOMEI's website, instructions on how to clone a hard drive. Really not too hard. And you just follow these steps here. Remember to check the box if you are doing a clone to an SSD, and it'll kick off. And after a few seconds, not really. After a while, this is a 2 terabyte drive that I was cloning, and believe me, it took a long time to clone it. And I didn't want to go through that again when it didn't boot up. So what I did is I cloned the drive, and once the clone completed, I shut my machine down, and I disconnected the original drive. That way I knew the system was going to boot up off of the new drive, and this is the screen that I got. Windows EFI. That's a problem. So this is a startup problem. The system doesn't know where to find this file, and they have a number of options. Under troubleshooting advanced options, there should be a startup repair option. If it's not there, then you have to go to use a device and then boot your media, like your Windows 11 DVD or your Windows 11 USB drive. Boot off of that. Make sure your locale information is all set correctly. Click Next, but do not click on Install Now. In the bottom left-hand corner, you're going to see an option for repair your computer. Click that. It'll bring you back into the UEFI settings, and you can go into Troubleshoot and Advanced Options and click Startup Repair. After a little while, if it fixes it, great, you're set. But in my situation, startup repair failed. At this point, we want to exit out of this. It'll bring us back to the UEFI options. And this time we want to go to Troubleshoot and Command Prompt. And the Command Prompt, we're going to use several different command line tools. BCDEDIT shows us what the boot configuration says as far as dual boot information. BootRec can fix a number of things with regard to the Windows startup. And DiskPart. And DiskPart can show us information. It can do a lot of other things. Don't mess around with it if you're not familiar with it. But DiskPart can show us information about the hard drives or boot devices that are available, their volumes, and the drive letters. And that's going to be important because we're going to fix the BCD file using information we got from DiskPart. Now, the first thing we're going to do is run BootRec. These 4 commands need to complete successfully. If they don't, we're going to go on to the other troubleshooting steps. If they do, you can reboot your computer and it should come up just fine. In my situation, the fix MBR worked fine, but the fix boot did not, and I got an access denied. This is where we're going to have to get into BCDEDIT, use our DiskPart information to correct the problem. Now, there are only 3 commands you really need to understand here with DiskPart. DiskPart gets you into the DiskPart utility. List disk lists the disks that you have available, and select disk allows you to select a disk so you can list volume. But the list volume, you want to pay attention to the drive letters. You'll notice here that my C drive is Windows 11, my E drive is Windows 10. That's important because later on we're going to be specifying partition C and partition E in the BCDEDIT. Type exit and press enter. Get out of this part and let's go into BCDEDIT. BCD stands for Boot Configuration Data. There are 3 sections if you're running a dual boot. There's the boot manager, there's the default section, and then there's an additional very long hexadecimal number for any additional partitions you want to boot off of. What you'll notice here is that the device and the OS device are both saying unknown. BCDEDIT allows us to set the parameters for each of the bootloader sections. We're going to start with the boot manager section and set the device to partition C. The syntax is rather specific, so if the operation doesn't complete successfully, check your syntax. Next, we'll move on to the bootloader section, and we'll set the device to the same. There are 2 areas in the bootloader section for each partition that you want to load: the device and the OS device. They're the same values. You set them to the partition letter and move on. It's a good idea to run BCDEDIT every single time you make a change to confirm the values were accepted. Do you remember earlier on I looked at the volume information before I cloned everything? And that is so that I can correlate those very long hexadecimal numbers, which is the volume number, with the operating systems. And I'm able to see that Windows 10 is associated with the correct volume, Windows 11 is associated with the correct volume. In any case, I just neglected to mention that, but we'll continue now. I can see that my values are being set properly in BCDEDIT, and next we'll move on to setting the OS device to match the device partition within that volume, and then we'll move on to the last section, which is our Windows 10 volume, set the device and set the OS device to partition E as opposed to partition C. And that should complete our changes with BCDEDIT. If you notice me highlighting things while I was doing this, when you left-click and drag and highlight a section, you can then press Enter, and it'll copy that into your clipboard. Then I hold the Shift and Insert key down to paste it into the BCDEDIT set command. Right-click will also paste it as well. In any case, that's just a little shortcut in case you're not familiar. When this is all done and I'm satisfied with the correct settings, I type in exit, which should bring me back to the startup options, and I can just select continue, and I should get my normal dual boot options. Select my first option, and I should boot into Windows 11. Well, this is interesting. It appears that my system had downloaded updates, and I didn't check that before I cloned the disk. So it's installing the updates now. I don't know for certain that the Windows updates caused the problem with cloning my hard drive and having it boot properly, but it was unexpected. You should expect when you clone these drives and you plug the new drive in that it just works. But when it doesn't, that's what I made this video. I hope this was useful for you and helps you solve a problem. If it does, please subscribe, smash that like button. I'd appreciate it. Have a great day.